The jet sliced through the sky like it had somewhere more important to be. Miles Bennett leaned back against the Italian leather seat fingers, tapping silently against the armrest. Outside, the coast of Georgia glimmered beneath a layer of clouds, but he wasn't looking. The view didn't matter. It rarely did anymore. The cabin was quiet. No assistants, no music, just him and the hum of the engines, steady and familiar like the life he'd built, structured and sterile. A notification buzzed on his phone. Calendar update: Savannah High School, 15-year reunion confirmed. He stared at it. The words pulsed on the screen like a dare. He should have deleted the invite weeks ago. Blocked the sender. Erased the town from memory the way he'd erased everything else. Instead, he clicked accept. Miles came the voice of his pilot through the intercom. "We'll be landing shortly. Car's ready." "Thanks, Tom." He pocketed the phone, reached for the cuff of his dress shirt, and adjusted it, though no one would notice. Not yet. Not until he walked into that town again, and every past whisper had to face what he'd become. A billionaire, CEO of one of the fastest-growing clean energy companies in the country. Name on magazines, featured speaker at summits, private meetings with senators and presidents. And still he could feel that boy inside him. The one who stood in a crowded gym, eyes down, laughter ringing in his ears. The wheels touched down with a soft bounce. Miles exhaled through his nose. His shoulders stayed squared. He'd spent 15 years becoming someone who didn't flinch. At the foot of the steps, a sleek black car waited. The driver, already holding the door open, gave a polite nod. "Welcome back to Savannah, Mr. Bennett." The scent hit him immediately, jasmine in the air, thick with humidity, the faint salt of the nearby river. It was softer than he remembered, or maybe he was just harder now. The car wound through cobbled streets, past old oaks draped in Spanish moss, past buildings that hadn't changed, not even the crooked mailbox on the corner of Broughton and East Broad. He didn't ask to go to the hotel. "River Street," he said instead. "Drop me off near the coffee shop." The driver glanced at him through the mirror. Clover and Finch. Miles nodded. "That's the one?" He remembered the name. Not because he ever went there, but because she had mentioned it. He didn't even know her name. Just a woman with a crooked ponytail and a laugh that lived in his memory like music. A week ago, during a board meeting in New York, someone spilled a bottle of water mid-presentation. Everyone froze except Miles, who had smiled because he remembered a stranger in a cafe in Savannah, who had spilled not one, but 3 drinks, and still managed to look like she ran the world. He stepped out of the car and onto the worn sidewalk. The cafe's wooden sign creaked overhead. He reached for the handle of the door. It didn't open. He blinked, tried again, pulled gently, then pushed. Still nothing. From inside, someone shouted, "Just a second." He stepped back. Through the glass, he saw her frustrated apron twisted elbow-deep in a battle with what appeared to be a rebellious espresso machine. She was muttering something he couldn't hear, hands flying, dark curls escaping from a loose bun. Then she glanced up. For a beat, her eyes locked on his. Recognition, maybe. Or just the usual surprise of seeing a man in a tailored suit standing outside a place where most customers wore flip-flops and t-shirts. She mouthed something. He thought it was try again. He did. This time the door gave a groan and opened halfway before sticking again. "Savannah Charm," she said from behind the counter, a little breathless, pushing a curl behind her ear. "Everything looks quaint until it has to work." Miles stepped inside. It was small, cozy, the kind of place with mismatched chairs and hand-drawn chalkboard menus. It smelled like cinnamon and second chances. He approached the counter slowly. "Black coffee, please," he said. She nodded, grabbing a mug. "No sugar, no sugar. Just like your expression." She teased, then paused. Sorry. I didn't mean to. He held up a hand, a faint smile forming. It's fine. I like honesty. She poured the coffee, slid it across the counter. Do I know you? She asked suddenly. You look... He shook his head before she could finish. I get that a lot. She tilted her head, studying him like she didn't believe him, but decided not to press. Well, mystery man, she said, if you plan on sitting, take the table by the window. The others are either wobbly or haunted. He glanced at the table. Sunlight poured in beside it. Outside, the river glinted through the trees. I'll take my chances, he said. She watched him go, watched how he moved like someone who belonged somewhere else, someone used to attention, but trying hard not to need it. As he sat, Miles caught his reflection in the glass, strong jaw, perfect suit, perfect life. Except it wasn't. He had everything people chase. And still something hollow echoed at the edges. He lifted the mug, took a sip. It burned a little, real, unpolished, honest, just like the girl behind the counter who didn't recognize him yet. Or maybe she did and just hadn't placed him. But she would. Everyone would. Because in 3 days he'd walk into that reunion and look the past in the face. Not to show off, not to gloat, but to finally stop running from a night that had defined him for too long. Across the room, Joanna leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. There was something about him she couldn't pin down. Something familiar. She didn't know his name, but she had a feeling he wasn't just passing through. Not him. Not this week, not with the reunion coming. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1. To let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The sun dipped lower over River Street, painting the cobblestones gold and softening the sharp corners of the world. Inside Clover and Finch, the hum of the espresso machine had finally quieted, and so had Joanna. She leaned on the counter, watching the stranger by the window sip his coffee slowly, as if time were his to spend. Something about him bothered her, not in a bad way, not exactly. More like a sensation she couldn't shake, like seeing a face in a dream, then catching a stranger on the sidewalk who looks almost the same. She grabbed a rag and started wiping down the already clean counter. I don't usually overthink customers, she muttered. Loretta and Myra, the cafe's 2 most dedicated regulars, sat perched at their usual corner table mid-debate about whether the town's new parking meters were part of a secret government experiment. Joanna Loretta called, squinting toward the window. Who's that man? The one dressed like Savannah's too small for him. Joanna glanced over. No idea. Walked in, didn't say much. Black coffee, no sugar. He's too polished for coffee. Myra sniffed. He looks like he drinks imported tea and eats ideas for breakfast. Joanna chuckled, but her eyes drifted back to the man by the window. He wasn't just polished. He was controlled. Every move measured, every glance calculated, but not cold. It was the kind of composure people either earned through years of practice or built to keep the world out. He looked up suddenly. Their eyes met. She didn't look away. Neither did he. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't awkward. It was curious. He gave a slight nod, barely noticeable. She blinked like it broke a trance and turned quickly to the register. You okay? Myra asked. Joanna shrugged. Just a strange day. The bell above the door jingled, and Chase Harlow strode in like he owned the building. His cologne arrived 3 seconds before he did, announcing itself to every breathing creature in the room. Jojo, he called out, too loud, too familiar. She straightened. It's Joanna. Chase grinned. You'll always be Jojo to me. Then I guess it's time we reevaluate what you're allowed to call me. He laughed like she was joking. She wasn't. Behind him trailed Brody and Travis, his ever-loyal shadows. They were wearing matching navy shirts that tried and failed to make them look like professionals. Chase leaned on the counter. "You hear about the reunion everyone's heard," Joanna said, voice even. "Small town. News travels faster than common sense. I'm chairing the event," he said proudly, like he'd just been elected mayor. "I'm sure you are. We're pulling out all the stops. Big screen music lights. A real celebration." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "Of what high school? Memories? Legacy? Yours, I assume." Chase smirked. "I was the prom king, Joe. People expect a certain standard. Prom was 15 years ago, and yet he said, tapping the counter, people still remember. Some things aren't worth remembering." Chase's grin faltered for half a second before he turned to Brody. "Get the flyer." Will you? Brody fumbled through his bag and produced a glossy invite. Gold letters, heavy paper. It shimmered like it had something to prove. Chase handed it over. "We'd love to have you. I run a business. I don't do pageants." "Come on," he said, leaning in just enough to trigger her personal space alarm. "You could use a little fun." She stared at him. "Define fun," before he could answer, a quiet voice cut in from behind. "I'll take another coffee." "Please." All four turned. The man from the window had walked up to the counter, mug in hand, expression unreadable. Chase glanced at him, assessing. "You new in town?" The man didn't blink. "Just visiting." "Welcome then." Chase extended a hand. "Chase Harlow." "Realtor, class of '08. He didn't take the hand. "Miles." A beat passed. Joanna stepped forward, breaking the tension. "I've got it," she said, reaching for the mug. Their fingers brushed briefly, and just like that, something shifted in her chest. She didn't know why. She just knew that silence between two people could say more than 1,000 Chase Harlows ever would. Miles returned to his table. Chase watched him go. "Bit stiff, isn't he?" he muttered. Joanna didn't answer. She made the coffee hands, steady heart, not. When she set it on the counter, she hesitated, then walked it over herself. Miles looked up as she placed it down. "You handled that well," he said quietly. She sat in the chair across from him without asking. "I'm used to handling things." He studied her. "And do people ever ask how you're doing?" "Not usually. I'm asking." She exhaled a laugh, soft. "You don't know me. I know what it's like to be underestimated." That stopped her. She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're not exactly easy to underestimate." "No," his smile was faint. "Look closer." She didn't have a response for that. Outside, the light was turning amber, the shadows stretching long across the street. Inside, the noise faded. Myra and Loretta had left. Chase and his crew were gone. Just the two of them now. "Can I ask you something?" Joanna said. Miles nodded. "Why Savannah? Of all places?" He looked out the window, expression distant. "Sometimes the past calls you back, whether you wanted to or not." She tilted her head. "You say that like this town owes you something." He turned back to her, eyes calm but heavy. "No, I owe myself." She didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But something told her by the time the reunion arrived, she would. And so would everyone else. It rained that night, soft and slow, like the sky had something to say, but wasn't quite ready to speak. Miles didn't sleep. He sat in his hotel suite, overlooking the river tie, loosened dress shirt, wrinkled from hours of sitting and thinking. The coffee cup from earlier still sat on the desk beside him, cold now, untouched since he'd brought it back. He replayed the cafe scene more than once. Joanna's eyes, curious, sharp, unafraid. The way she'd sat across from him like she didn't care who he was, but wanted to understand why he was. That was rare. In his world, people didn't ask real questions. They asked for favors, for funding, for something they'd already rehearsed, asking for 10 different ways. But not her. He got up, wandered to the window, and watched Savannah breathe under the weight of the storm. The streets glistened, the oaks dripped, and somewhere not far from where he stood, she was probably closing up her cafe, humming to herself, locking the front door that barely worked. He smiled without meaning to. Then, as if waking from a trance, he turned back to the desk, opened his laptop, and typed 2 words into the search bar. Joanna Fields. Not much came up. A few local business features, an article from the Savannah Times about women-owned shops on River Street, and a blurry photo of her holding a tray of cinnamon rolls that looked like they weighed more than she did. Her smile in that photo was real, unpolished, warm. He closed the tab. He didn't need to search. He'd go back tomorrow. For coffee? For her. For whatever came next. By morning, the rain had passed, and left behind the kind of air that made everything feel newly washed, like Savannah had pressed reset on itself overnight. Joanna walked into Clover and Finch before sunrise. The cafe was quiet, dim, the smell of old beans and flour still lingering from the day before. She flicked on the lights, stepped behind the counter, and just stood there. She dreamed of him. Miles. Only in the dream he wasn't sitting at the table. He was leaving, and she was calling out to him, but her voice wouldn't come. She shook it off and started setting up the routine, grounding her, steadying her hands. But part of her was waiting, she knew it. Waiting to see if he'd walk back in. And part of her hated that. At 8:14, the bell jingled. It was him. He stepped in like he'd been coming there for years. Same clean lines, same quiet presence. But this time he looked different. Looser, somehow. Less like a man running from something. More like a man running toward it. Back for round 2, she asked, not looking up right away. Couldn't stay away. Some people get hooked on caffeine. Others get hooked on awkward small talk and jammed doors. I think I'm the second kind. She glanced up. He was smiling. Small, controlled, but genuine. She tried not to smile back. How do you feel about blueberry scones? She asked. Suspicious, but willing. Good, because that's all I've got unless you want a stale muffin or life advice from Loretta. I think I'll take the scone. He sat at the same table. She brought over his order coffee, no sugar, and the scone with a napkin folded underneath like a note she hadn't written yet. I Googled you, she said suddenly, sitting across from him again, wiping her hands on her apron. He didn't flinch. And you're a little more than just visiting. That depends who you ask. I asked the internet. He sipped his coffee. Did it tell you I'm a terrible dancer and allergic to pineapple? No. But it said you're the CEO of a company I can't pronounce. He leaned forward slightly. Bennett Innovations, renewable energy, solar mostly. She looked at him carefully. So why lie? I didn't lie. You didn't tell the truth. I wasn't ready. She nodded slowly. Fair. There was silence then, but it wasn't heavy. It was thick with things neither of them wanted to rush. So she said after a pause, Are you here for the reunion? Yes. And is that a good idea? He looked down at his coffee, then back up. I don't know yet. Her voice softened. Did they hurt you? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the window, eyes focused somewhere deep in the past. There was a night, he said finally. Junior year. Prom. I showed up in a suit that didn't fit, holding flowers I couldn't afford. I didn't even make it inside. Joanna's breath caught. They played a prank, he continued. It wasn't loud or messy. It was just cruel enough to stick. And you left. I left the next morning. My mom packed the car while I sat on the porch, wondering what I'd done to deserve it. Joanna reached across the table. Not far. Just close enough that if he needed to feel something human, it was there. You didn't do anything, she said quietly. He met her eyes. I came back to see if the boy I was could finally face the people who made him disappear. And I haven't decided. She studied him, heart pinched tight with something she didn't expect to feel so soon. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. Because she knew what it was like to shrink herself down to survive something. They sat like that for a while, not touching, not moving, just seeing. Outside, the street started to bustle. Customers trickled in, the cafe filled with noise. Miles stood. I should let you work. Joanna hesitated. Will you come back? His answer was simple. Yes. And with that, he left, just like before. Only this time, she knew he wasn't walking away. He was walking toward something, maybe even toward her. And for the first time in a long time, she hoped he'd find what he came for. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The email came just after midnight. Subject: Savannah High Reunion. Final confirmation and program. Miles stared at the glowing screen in the dark hotel room, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The message was crisp, overly cheerful. Digital confetti danced at the top of the invitation, a mockery of celebration. We're excited to see you back where it all began. He read the line 3 times. Where it all began. Or where everything broke. The program listed out the events in neat bullet points. Welcome speech by Chase Harlow. Memory slideshow. Open mic then and now. Recognition awards. Closing remarks, and right beneath it all, hosted at Savannah Community Hall doors. Open at 6:00 p.m. sharp. Dress semi-formal. Nostalgia required. He closed the laptop and leaned back into the silence. Nostalgia wasn't what brought him here. He knew what Chase was doing. This wasn't about reconnecting. It was about reasserting control. Chase had always needed the spotlight, always craved the room's attention like oxygen. And Miles showing up quiet, successful, unbothered, wasn't part of the story he wanted to tell. Especially not with a past that had been so carefully curated to make Miles the punchline. But things had changed. Miles wasn't 17 anymore. He wouldn't flinch this time. Joanna stood behind the counter the next morning, towel in one hand, wiping down the same spot for the 3rd time. Her mind wasn't on the cafe. It was on him. She hadn't expected Miles to get under her skin like this. Not so soon. Not like this. He was polite but distant. Kind but unreadable. He'd told her a fraction of the truth and still managed to crack something open in her she hadn't let breathe in years. Not since Daniel. The name dropped in her mind like a stone. Daniel with his promises, his late nights, the way he'd said forever and meant until things got hard. She'd spent years cleaning up after that goodbye. Now here was Miles, saying almost nothing, but somehow meaning everything. The bell above the door jingled. She looked up, expecting him, but it wasn't. Chase Harlow again. This time in khakis and a blazer holding a thick black folder. Morning, Joe, he said, too chipper. I brought posters. She raised an eyebrow. Did the city give you a license to promote yourself like this, or are you just winging it again, funny? He said, tapping the folder. These are for the reunion. Just thought your window could use some school spirit. She folded her arms. Why here? Because half the town walks by this place every morning. Free marketing. Come on, you used to be fun. I used to be 16. He pulled out a glossy poster with a sepia-toned photo of Savannah High and a giant gold title, Savannah High, A Night to Remember. She took it, flipped it around. A night to remember? Sounds ominous. Chase laughed, but his eyes flicked to her reaction. You're coming, right? He asked. I haven't decided. You should. It'll be great. Even the mystery billionaire said yes. Joanna froze. What? Chase smirked. Oh yeah. Word is someone from our class hit it big. Left town, built an empire, coming back to, reminisce, settle old scores. He leaned closer. Or maybe just show off. Joanna's heart started to beat faster. You know his name? She asked. Nah. Harper's been tight-lipped about it. Says she's saving the surprise. Probably someone none of us even remember. She forced a smile. Sounds exciting. Chase grabbed a cinnamon roll and dropped a 5 on the counter. See you there, Joe. When the door closed behind him, she stood motionless. Someone from town. Someone nobody remembered. She looked towards the table by the window where Miles usually sat. Empty. Not today? Not yet. She picked up her phone and stared at it, thumb hovering over his number. She didn't text, not yet. Instead, she went to the window, peeled back the edge of the poster, and taped it in place. A night to remember. She had no idea how true that would be. That afternoon, Miles stood on the sidewalk outside Savannah High School. The building hadn't changed. Still the same chipped columns, faded red brick rusting bike racks. The flag flapped lazily in the breeze just like it used to. He wasn't sure what made him drive there. Maybe he needed to see it. Maybe he needed proof it was smaller than he remembered. But standing there now, it wasn't. It was exactly the same. That was the problem. He walked up to the front steps and sat down, the sun warm on his back. A few cars passed. No one stopped. He closed his eyes and let the noise fade. He could still hear it 15 years ago, the muffled laughter, the whispered jokes, the sound of his own breath catching in his throat when he realized the prank wasn't just a prank, that it was him. He wasn't the awkward kid with second-hand shoes anymore. But some echoes didn't leave just because you changed zip codes and added a few commas to your bank account. Miles. The voice pulled him out of the memory like a lifeline. He turned. Joanna stood at the bottom of the steps, hair loose from the breeze, concern in her eyes. How did you find me? He asked. I didn't. I was walking. Saw a ghost on the stairs. He tried to smile. Failed. She walked up and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, They sent the program. I figured. There's a slideshow, a speech, probably some carefully edited jokes. She glanced at him. You think they'll use the video? He didn't answer. She exhaled slowly. That's not nostalgia. That's cruelty wrapped in tradition. Chase doesn't see the difference. Joanna turned to face him. You don't have to go, you know. I do. Why, he looked at her, really looked. The sunlight caught the edge of her jaw, softening the fight in her posture. Because if I don't, I stay the version of me they created. She blinked, eyes glassy. You really came back to reclaim your story. He nodded. She stood, brushed off her jeans. Then you'd better tell a better one. As she turned to leave, he called out Joanna. She stopped. Will you be there? Her answer was quiet but sure. If you are. And then she walked away, her steps steady, leaving him on the steps of his past, with a future suddenly worth facing. The wind carried the scent of magnolia through the open windows of the cafe. Late afternoon light stretched across the floorboards, golden and quiet. Joanna stood at the counter, absently arranging a tray of lemon bars that no one had asked for. Her mind wasn't on pastries. It was on the man who haunted her thoughts like a song stuck on loop. Miles. Something about him didn't line up, not in a suspicious way, in a deeper, more human way. He wore his success like armor, but it didn't hide the ache beneath. And the way he looked at her, measured but soft, left her off balance. She caught herself glancing at the door every few minutes, waiting. Wishing. The bell finally rang at 4:12 p.m., but it wasn't him. It was Harper Quinn, hair in a neat braid, clipboard in hand. Calm, cool, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to run a room, and probably a country if given the chance. Joanna offered a polite smile. Event planner on caffeine duty, Harper returned it with a smirk. You caught me. Large cold brew. No sugar, no chaos. Coming right up. As Joanna filled the cup, Harper set her clipboard on the counter. Her voice lowered a bit. You know Miles, don't you? Joanna's hand paused mid-pour. Careful now. I've served him coffee a few times. Why Harper's expression shifted curiosity edged with something like concern. He's on the guest list. Confirmed last minute. Nobody expected him to show. Joanna handed over the drink. You mean because of the past? I mean because of Chase. Joanna leaned on the counter. Is he planning something? Harper hesitated. Then sighed. Look, I'm supposed to be neutral. It's a reunion, not a courtroom. But Chase, he hasn't changed. Still chasing attention like it's his full-time job. It is, Joanna said flatly. There's talk of a slideshow. A funny one. I don't know all the details, but if Miles is involved even unintentionally, it won't be good. Joanna felt her chest tighten. You could stop it. I'm trying, quietly. But Chase has pull, money, a way of making people believe his version of the story. Harper sipped her drink. Just keep an eye on Miles. He doesn't know how loud this town can get when it wants to bury someone. Joanna nodded slowly. He's not the same kid they remember, Good Harper said. But that doesn't mean they won't try to drag him back there. As Harper turned to leave, Joanna called after her. Why tell me this? Harper didn't pause. Because you're the only one he seems to look at like he's still got something left to lose. The door closed softly behind her. Joanna stood there a long time, the lemon bars forgotten. Miles sat alone on a bench in Forsyth Park, the fountain gurgling behind him like it had for decades. He remembered sitting here once senior year listening to music on cheap headphones and wondering if he'd ever belong anywhere. Now he belonged to boardrooms and billion-dollar contracts and still felt like an outsider in his own hometown. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. Miles Bennett. There was a beat of silence. Then, you really came back. It was Chase. Miles didn't speak. I gotta admit, Chase continued voice smooth. When I saw your name on the list, I thought someone was playing a joke. But then I remembered no one ever joked about you. You were always the punchline. Miles kept his voice steady. What do you want, Chase? I'm just reaching out. Welcoming you home. We're all looking forward to seeing you. I'm not here for you. No, but you are here. And that's enough. Chase chuckled. You should prepare a few words for the mic. People love a good look how far I've come speech. Miles didn't reply. And hey, Chase added, his tone sharpening. Don't get any ideas about rewriting history? Savannah remembers. We all do. Click. The call ended. Miles let the silence settle again. Then he stood, pocketed the phone, and started walking. Slowly, purposefully. Back toward the place that grounded him more than the skyline of any city ever could. Joanna was locking up when he arrived. She looked up from the key just as he stepped onto the porch. I wasn't sure you'd come today, she said. I needed air. You find any A little? And a phone call from Chase. Her expression darkened. He called you. Miles nodded. Said the town remembers. Joanna opened the door again and motioned him inside. Well, the town also remembers who won the pie contest 3 years in a row and thinks Elvis is still alive, so. He smiled, just barely. You make a convincing case. Inside, she poured 2 mugs of decaf, handed him one, and sat across from him in the quiet. Harper came by, she said. She's worried. She should be. She said there's a video. Miles didn't flinch. Of course there is. That night was their masterpiece. Joanna searched his face. Why not stop it? Speak up. Say something. Because I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not here to erase the past. I'm here to stand in front of it and not look away. She looked down at her mug. That's brave. No, he said quietly. It's necessary. They sat in silence again, but this time it felt like something shared, not avoided. Joanna reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I didn't know if I should show you this. He opened it. A printout of the reunion's event layout. The names, the schedule, a section marked Alumni Highlights, video segment compiled by Chase Harlow. She watched his face as he read it. His jaw tensed, but only slightly. Will you let them show it? Miles folded the paper again. Let them. Her voice caught. Why? Because what they don't realize is what they thought was the end of me was the beginning. Joanna stared at him, something soft and fierce rising in her chest at the same time. Then she said without hesitation, I'll be there, sitting in the front row. He looked at her, something flickering behind his calm exterior. Gratitude. And something close to hope. You don't have to do that, he said. I want to. He stood mug still in hand, the cafe bathed in warm golden silence. Thank you, he said. She shook her head. Don't thank me yet. He turned to leave. But before he stepped out, he paused, one hand on the old wooden door. If they expect me to stand there and shrink, they've forgotten who I've become. And then, without another word, he left, leaving behind only the sound of the door's quiet click and a woman who now carried part of his past in her heart. Saturday came with a sky so blue it almost looked painted too perfect for what was coming. Joanna was already at the cafe before 6, even though she'd told Sadie Lynn she'd open late today. She needed the space, the quiet, the clink of mugs, the warmth of the espresso machine, the comfort of doing something with her hands, while her mind swirled like a storm over open water. The reunion was tonight, and Miles hadn't been in all day. Not a text, not a call, nothing. She told herself it didn't matter. He didn't owe her anything. But that didn't quiet the ache behind her ribs every time the bell above the door didn't ring. At 7:15 a.m., the door finally opened. But it wasn't him. It was Mrs. Delaney, her landlady cardigan buttoned wrong, and lipstick slightly off-center, holding a brown envelope like it was made of glass. Morning, Han, she said, stepping in. Hey, Mrs. Delaney. The older woman crossed to the counter, set the envelope down, and looked at Joanna with a weight in her eyes that made Joanna pause. This came for you, she said, tapping the envelope gently. Dropped off by a courier. Big fella. Didn't smile. Joanna wiped her hands on a towel and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter typed, not handwritten. Short. Joanna. If I could explain it all, I would. But I need this night to speak for me. Thank you for seeing me, not the name, not the story, just me. If you're sitting in the front row, I'll know I still have a reason to keep becoming who I'm meant to be. Joanna pressed her lips together, blinked twice, then folded the letter with a care that felt sacred. He's not running, she said softly. Mrs. Delaney raised an eyebrow. Is that what you were afraid of? Joanna thought about it, then nodded. Yeah. Well, the older woman said, adjusting her cardigan, if he's anything like what you've said, he's not the one who should be afraid. Miles stood in front of the mirror in his hotel suite, tying his tie with precise, practiced fingers. He wore navy. Classic, clean, understated. The kind of suit you chose when you wanted to make a statement without saying a word. Behind him, the television played softly local news, a weather update, then a segment on the reunion. Chase had managed to get a reporter out there early, grinning for the cameras, waving at passing guests. Miles turned it off. The silence was better, more honest. His phone buzzed. It was Harper. Harper Quinn. All set. Slideshow's been edited. Let's just say it's not the version Chase wanted. See you there? Miles exhaled a slow breath that loosened his shoulders. He wasn't walking into a trap anymore, but that didn't mean it wouldn't sting. The Savannah Community Hall glowed in warm gold light, strung with soft bulbs that gave the illusion of magic. The walls were lined with old yearbook photos, tables draped in maroon and gold cloths, centerpieces made of mason jars and wildflowers. Nostalgia dripped from every detail. Joanna stepped inside just after 7, wearing a dark green dress that caught the light when she moved and made people turn twice before realizing who she was. She didn't care about the looks. She only looked for him. Harper met her at the entrance clipboard, still in hand, but the stress lines in her forehead had softened. "You made it," she said. Any sign of Chase Harper gave a tight smile. Holding court near the punch bowl. He's told the story of his legendary prom win 5 times already. Joanna looked past the crowd, scanning. And Miles not yet. Joanna nodded, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse. "I saved you a seat up front," Harper said gently, touching her elbow, "in case you still planned on being there." Joanna hesitated. "Then, yeah, I do." She followed Harper to the front row, heart steady but alert. She wasn't sure what would happen tonight, but whatever it was, she wouldn't look away. Miles stepped into the hall at exactly 7:38. No fanfare, no spotlight. But heads turned anyway. Chase caught sight of him first. His smile tightened just a little. Miles walked past him without pause, nodding politely at the small clusters of classmates he barely remembered. Some nodded back, some stared, some whispered. But Joanna, she stood up. She didn't wait for him to reach her. She met him halfway, right there in the aisle under the soft string lights as the music faded and the reunion program began. "You clean up all right?" she said. "I had a good reason to." He glanced around. "Thank you for coming. I told you I would." "I know, I just wasn't sure anyone ever kept promises in this town." She smiled, and something about it made the noise of the room slip away. "Go sit," she whispered. "I want to see this." He turned and walked toward the podium just as Harper took the mic. "Good evening, class of 2008, she said with a warm smile. "We're so glad to welcome you back tonight. We've got a night full of memories, music, and moments, some sweet, some awkward, all part of our story." A soft wave of laughter moved through the crowd. Harper gestured to the screen. "We're starting with something special, a tribute to where we've been and who we've become." The lights dimmed. The video began. Old footage, yearbook photos, clips from football games, science fairs, theater productions. The crowd chuckled, clapped, sighed. And then a familiar image flickered onto the screen. A boy in a too-big suit, flowers in his hand, standing at the entrance to prom. There was a murmur in the crowd. Joanna's breath caught. But instead of the cruel prank that had once followed, the screen faded to black, and new words appeared. Sometimes the people we forget become the ones we wish we'd remembered. Then photos of Miles. Present day. Speaking at clean energy summits, shaking hands with world leaders, touring solar plants in developing countries, standing with his team, smiling, becoming. The crowd went silent. No laughter, no cruel whispers, just stillness. Then applause. Real applause. Joanna looked over at Chase. He didn't clap, but his eyes said everything. He hadn't expected this. Miles stood when Harper called his name. He walked to the mic slowly, calmly. He didn't touch the podium. He just looked at them, all of them, and then said quietly, "Thank you for remembering me. Nothing more." He stepped down, walked back to the front row, sat beside Joanna. And for the first time since stepping into that room, he smiled like it reached all the way to his past. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "You didn't have to say much." "I didn't come to speak," he said. "I came to be seen." And he was. Finally. The music picked up again after the slideshow, smooth jazz floating through the air like it had nowhere else to be. Couples drifted toward the dance floor. Classmates mingled in tight circles, the clink of champagne glasses mixed with bursts of laughter and the shuffle of dress shoes on the floor. But Miles didn't move. He stayed seated at the edge of the front row, his hands clasped, his gaze still resting on the screen, now black and still. That single sentence lingered in his mind, like an echo. Sometimes the people we forget become the ones we wish we'd remembered. Joanna sat beside him, sipping a glass of sparkling water, her eyes scanning the crowd. "You did it," she said softly. He turned his head just enough to meet her eyes. "Did what walked into a room full of ghosts, and didn't let any of them haunt you." A faint smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "Feels a little unreal." "That's because it is," she said. "Nothing about this night was ever supposed to be fair. But you changed the story without ever raising your voice." Miles looked at her for a long moment, and then quieter. "Would it be too much to ask you to dance?" Joanna raised an eyebrow. "You dance?" He hesitated. "Not well, but sincerely." He nodded. She set down her glass and stood smoothing the skirt of her dress. "Then yes, I'd love to." They walked to the floor together, weaving through people who gave them side glances and half smiles, like they were trying to place this new version of him against the one they thought they remembered. The music changed something slow and classic, with a swing that made you want to lean just a little closer. Miles placed a tentative hand at the small of her back, the other holding hers gently. They swayed in rhythm close enough to hear each other breathe, to speak without speaking. She looked up at him. "When do you go back?" He didn't answer right away. "Soon," he said. "There's a board meeting in San Francisco next week, a press release, and a factory launch in Nairobi next month." She nodded, her eyes not leaving his. "That's your world now." "It is," he said. "But it's not everything." She tilted her head slightly. "What is—" He didn't smile. Not really, but his voice held something warmer than words. Connection. Meaning. The moments that matter when the noise dies down. Joanna looked down for a second, her hand tightening slightly in his. "Do you think those moments can happen in a town like this?" His eyes didn't waver. "I think they already have." She looked up again, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. "You're not what I expected." "What were you expecting?" She shrugged. "A little more bitterness, a little less grace." "I had enough bitterness to last a lifetime," he said. "But it never helped me breathe easier." The song began to fade. Another melody picked up faster, now more upbeat. A signal for couples to trade in quiet for nostalgia. September by Earth. Wind and Fire started playing, and half the class whooped as if they'd been waiting for it all night. Joanna laughed and stepped back. "Now this is where I exit gracefully." Miles smiled. "And leave me to suffer alone. You said you don't dance well. I'm sparing you." She turned to walk off the floor, but just as she reached the edge, she was intercepted by Chase. "Of course." Miles stopped cold just far enough away to see, but not hear. Chase leaned in his smile, too wide his hand, a little too casual, on Joanna's arm. She shifted her weight, polite, but clearly tense. Miles watched her mouth move short-clipped responses. She tried to step aside, but Chase angled back in. Miles didn't move. Not out of hesitation, out of trust. And sure enough, Joanna lifted her hand, gently placed it on Chase's wrist, and said something that made him freeze, just for a second. Then he laughed, backed off, and walked toward the bar alone. Joanna caught Miles's eyes across the room, and winked. He exhaled, then crossed to meet her at the edge of the floor. "You handled that with precision," he said. "I've had years of practice. You didn't need me to step in." She smirked. "What would you have done, out-earn him?" He laughed. "I'm fine," she added, her voice softening. "But thank you for not assuming I wasn't." The crowd was shifting now. Old friends pulling out phones for selfies, laughter bouncing off the walls, memories being polished and rewritten in real time. Miles and Joanna moved toward the refreshment table, out of the center, somewhere quieter. He picked up a ginger ale. "Do you ever feel like you outgrew this place but stayed anyway?" Joanna's gaze lingered on a group of classmates posing under a banner that read, "Once a Panther, always a Panther. I used to," she said, "for a long time." "What changed?" She took a sip of her drink. "I stopped waiting for it to become what I needed, and just started becoming that for myself." Miles looked at her like he was seeing her all over again. "You make this place better." "I try." They stood in silence a moment longer. Then Joanna said, "You know you didn't just walk in tonight and survive it. You changed the temperature of the whole room." Miles blinked. "What do you mean? Before you got here, everyone was still playing pretend, chasing high school trophies, holding on to things like they were gold. And now?" She smiled gently. "Now they've seen what it looks like when someone chooses growth over revenge." He was quiet, but there was a shimmer in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For not treating me like I was still 17. She stepped closer. "And thank you for becoming the kind of man who'd come back just to give that 17-year-old peace." They didn't dance again. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, standing at the edge of everything, neither of them felt like they were on the outside looking in anymore. They were exactly where they were meant to be. Together. Seen, heard, and finally, remembered. The stars were out in full by the time Joanna stepped onto the back porch of the community hall. Heels dangling from her fingers, the air finally cool against her skin. Laughter and music still hummed behind her, muffled by the heavy doors she let close gently behind her. She needed a breath. Just a moment to take it all in. Miles joined her without saying a word. He handed her a small paper cup of punch and leaned against the railing beside her. They stood like that, shoulders a few inches apart, looking out at the dark stretch of lawn and the dim outline of the town beyond. "You survived?" she said, sipping the drink with a wry smile. "I did more than survive." "You did?" she said, nodding. "You really did." They stood in silence for a moment, letting the truth of that settle. Then Miles spoke, voice lower, slower than before. "I used to think success would be the thing that finally made me feel safe." Joanna looked at him. "But it didn't," he continued. "It just made the silence louder, the rooms bigger, the pressure heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still that kid outside the gym, with crushed flowers and a laugh track waiting to roll." She listened, not rushing to answer. The way he said it, it wasn't about pity. It was about finally being able to say it out loud. "I tried to fill the space with work, with cities, with milestones," he said, "but nothing felt real, not like today." Joanna tilted her head. What about today felt real, you? The word sat between them. Bare, undecorated, and so heavy. Joanna didn't flinch. Why now? He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers like he needed her to understand before he could believe it himself. Because you didn't treat me like a project, or a prize. You never asked about the headlines or the money or the comeback story. I didn't have to, she said quietly. It was written all over your face. Miles exhaled a long breath he hadn't known he was holding. I keep asking myself, he said, if I had come back 5 years ago, would I have noticed you? Joanna raised an eyebrow. What do you mean I think I would have been too distracted by proving something, too wrapped up in becoming someone important, and I would have walked right past the person who actually saw me? She looked down at the cup in her hands. I don't need to be seen, Miles. He nodded. I know. That's what makes you different. A door creaked open behind them. Light spilled across the porch as Harper stepped out, heels in one hand, clipboard finally gone. There you two are, she said with a smirk. You missed the group photo. Chase was very disappointed. Joanna grinned. We'll recover. Harper walked to the railing, letting the night breeze hit her face. It was a good night. Shockingly good. Miles looked at her. Thanks for protecting me from what it could have been. You didn't need protection, Harper replied. You just needed the truth to be louder than the past. She glanced at Joanna, then back at Miles. You staying long? He hesitated. I was planning to leave tomorrow. Joanna's heart gave a quiet lurch. She looked away. But now, I'm not sure, he said. Something about this place feels different. Harper gave him a look, one part curious, one part knowing. Well, if you do stay, you might consider starting somewhere that's not a 5-star hotel? She nudged Joanna gently. Like a town that serves real coffee. Joanna smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Miles noticed. Harper took the hint. All right, I'm calling it a night. Don't stay out too long. The ghosts of high school past tend to roam after midnight. She disappeared back inside, leaving them with the crickets and the breeze. Joanna broke the silence. You don't owe anyone anything, Miles. He turned toward her again, gently. What if I want to? She blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? What if I want to owe someone something real? What if I want to stay, not for a headline or a redemption arc, but just to see where this goes? Joanna's throat tightened. Are you asking me if it's okay to want that? He stepped closer. I'm asking if it's okay to want you. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The night wrapped around them like a question with no easy answer. Joanna looked down, then back up at him. I need to know something. Anything. If you stay... You're not staying to rewrite the past, are you? He shook his head. No. I'm staying to build something forward. She nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. Then stay. His face softened. I will. He reached out gently, brushing a piece of hair from her face. It was such a small gesture, but it held the weight of everything unsaid, everything hoped for. The door behind them opened again. A few classmates spilled out, laughing, shoes in hand, still buzzing from the night. Joanna stepped back slightly. Come by tomorrow. We open at 8. Miles smiled. I'll be there at 7:59. She rolled her eyes, but her smile said everything else. As he watched her walk back inside, something settled in his chest that hadn't been there in years. Not closure, not triumph, just peace. And in the soft quiet of a Georgia night, that peace felt louder than any applause ever had. The morning after the reunion, Savannah felt like it had taken a deep breath, and finally exhaled. The sun hung low over the rooftops, casting long golden shadows down the quiet street. The smell of brewed coffee drifted from Joanna's cafe, mixing with the sweetness of cinnamon, and something else, something hopeful. Miles arrived just as the first light caught the windows. He wasn't in a suit today, just jeans, a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and that same quiet look that carried a weight behind it. Joanna was already at the counter, hair pulled back, hands dusted with flour. She glanced up as the bell chimed and gave him a look that was more than just, "Good morning, it was there you are." 7:59, he said, holding up his phone. "Told you." She wiped her hands and poured him a fresh cup of coffee without asking. "You're late. I opened early." He took the cup, letting the warmth settle into his palms. Couldn't sleep. Mind was racing. Too much excitement. Too many emotions. I didn't expect last night to feel like something I'd miss if I left. Joanna leaned against the counter, studying him. "You're not leaving today, are you?" "I'm not sure yet," he admitted. "I cleared my schedule for a few more days. Thought I'd see where things go." Her lips curved slightly. "In town or with me?" His answer came without hesitation. Both. She didn't look away, but there was a shift, subtle like a window cracking open in a room that had been closed for too long. Before either of them could say more, the door opened again, and Harper breezed in, clipboard back in hand, sunglasses perched on her head. "Morning," she said, eyeing them both. "Am I interrupting something real or just potential?" Joanna rolled her eyes. "Just coffee." Harper raised a brow. Looked like a little more than caffeine to me. Miles smiled into his cup. "Anyway," Harper continued, flipping a page, "I'm here on official post-reunion business. Debriefing, notes, damage control." Joanna laughed. "Anything catch fire?" "Not literally," Harper replied. "But Chase is already telling people the video was his idea of a redemption arc. Says he was inspired to give you a platform." Miles sighed. "Let him talk." "You're not going to set the record straight?" Harper asked. He shook his head. Why, the people who mattered already saw the truth. Joanna looked at him with quiet pride. Harper nodded, flipping to another page. Also, slight gossip ripple. "People are asking if you're staying. Some think you're buying property. Others think you're scouting the town for a new venture." Miles raised an eyebrow. "That's quick. Small towns are basically a live broadcast with no mute button." He glanced at Joanna. "Maybe I should give them something to talk about." Joanna laughed. "Maybe ease into it." Harper gave them both a sly grin, then turned serious. "In all honesty, Miles, last night, you didn't just change how they see you. You shifted something in this town. People are talking about forgiveness, growth, about who we give second chances to and who we overlook." He met her gaze. "That wasn't just me. You had a hand in it too." Harper shrugged. "I just ran logistics. You brought the truth." She tapped her clipboard once more and gave Joanna a small nod. "I'll leave you two to coffee. Or whatever." As she left, Joanna picked up a cloth and wiped the counter a little too focused. Miles leaned in. "You okay?" She hesitated. "Yeah, just trying not to rush something good." He watched her for a moment. "Joanna, if this is too fast or complicated," she cut him off, gentle but firm. "It's not that, it's just, I've built this whole life on steady ground, a place where I know what to expect, how things move. And now with you here, it feels like something's about to shift. Is that a bad thing I don't know yet?" He set his coffee down, stepping around the counter to stand closer. "I don't want to uproot your life," he said. "I'm not here to sweep in and rewrite everything. I just want to see if we can write something together, even if it's one page at a time." Joanna looked up and something softened in her eyes. Something real. "I like the way you say that." He smiled. "You like me." "I didn't say that." You didn't deny it either. She shook her head, laughing quietly. You're relentless, only when it matters. They stood there in the soft light, the cafe quiet around them, the scent of something baking in the oven, wrapping around their conversation like a promise. Then the door opened again. This time it was a man in a blue polo and khakis, mid-50s eyes, kind but curious. Excuse me, he said. Are you the owner? Joanna straightened. Yes, that's me, he smiled. I was at the reunion last night. My daughter graduated a few years ago, but I heard the story about Miles, about how this place was the only one that welcomed him back without hesitation. Miles turned eyebrows raised. The man extended a hand. Roger Sutton. I work with the city. We've been looking for someone to help revitalize the downtown strip. Small business initiatives, community outreach. I'd love to talk if either of you is open to it. Joanna blinked. You're offering a conversation, he said. That could turn into something more if the fit is right. Miles looked at Joanna. Seems like the town's not done rewriting its own story. Joanna smiled, heartful. Neither are we. The next morning brought a soft rain, the kind that blurred the edges of things, and made the world feel quieter. Joanna stood at the window of the cafe, watching the water trail down the glass as the hum of early customers filled the room. The gray skies made the warm glow of the space feel more intimate, almost like a secret. Miles hadn't come in yet. She told herself not to read into it. He'd said he was staying. He'd said all the right things. But something about his silence this morning pulled at her that old habit of waiting for the other shoe to drop because it always had, hadn't it? At 8:42, the bell finally chimed. But it wasn't Miles. It was Chase. Joanna's heart dipped, then steadied. She set the towel down and stepped behind the register, her voice calm but cool. Morning. Chase looked out of place. No sunglasses, no smirk, just khakis and a pale blue shirt damp from the rain. Can I talk to you? He asked. She hesitated, then gestured toward a table near the window. 5 minutes. He nodded, took the seat. She brought him black coffee. No sugar, no frills. Fitting. Chase wrapped his hands around the cup like he needed something solid. I owe you an apology. Joanna blinked. For what? The video. The years of high school torment, or trying to hijack a narrative that wasn't yours to tell. He flinched a little. All of it, I guess. She didn't sit. Why now? He looked out the window, rain catching in the corners of his eyes like he couldn't meet hers directly. Because I saw him last night. Really saw him. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't proud of who I used to be. Joanna's voice softened, but only slightly. You could have ruined him. I know, he said quietly. But I didn't. And not because of some noble reason, because of Harper. She told me if I played that version of the video, she'd walk out on stage and tell the truth. Joanna raised an eyebrow. Sounds like Harper saved you from yourself. He nodded. She did. But Miles, he didn't even look at me like I was a threat. He looked at me like I didn't matter. And I guess that hurt more than being hated. Joanna folded her arms. So what do you want now? Chase looked up at her, and for the first time there was no arrogance, just honesty. To ask you to tell him I'm sorry. I don't think he wants to hear it from me, but maybe hearing it exists might mean something. Joanna studied him for a long moment. Then she said quietly, He doesn't need your apology to move on, I know, Chase said. But I needed to give it. He stood left a 10 on the table and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Miles arrived an hour later, rain dripping off his coat as he stepped inside, bringing a chill with him. but his smile warmed her immediately. "Sorry I'm late," he said. "Had to take a call." Joanna handed him a towel. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "That city planner, Roger, he wants to meet again. There's talk of a sustainable business incubator downtown. A chance to help small businesses grow mentorship funding, the whole thing." Her eyes widened. "You're considering it. I'm more than considering it," he said. "I'm thinking of staying long enough to build it." The room spun slightly. "In a good way." "You'd really do that?" she asked. "Put down roots." Miles looked around the cafe, then back at her. "This place reminds me what it means to matter for the right reasons." She laughed softly. "Careful." That almost sounded poetic. He stepped closer. "I also talked to my assistant. Cleared my schedule for the next month." Joanna blinked. "A month?" "Thought I'd learn how to bake something from scratch. See if I could earn a shift behind the counter." She leaned in, teasing. "You know we don't pay billionaires in cash, right? Only pie." "I'll take it," he said, brushing a finger across hers as she reached for a mug. They stood in the quiet, something unspoken, thick between them. Then Joanna pulled her hand back gently. "There's something you should know," she said. "Chase came in this morning." Miles stilled, said he was sorry, that Harper forced his hand on the video, that he saw what you became, and it shook him. Miles was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "I don't need his apology. I told him that," she said. But Miles added, "I'm glad he offered it, even if it was for his own peace." Joanna nodded. "He said you didn't even look at him like he mattered, that it hurt more than hate." Miles tilted his head. "I didn't mean to do that, but maybe that's part of the lesson." Joanna looked at him. "What do you mean? That you can spend your whole life trying to be someone, trying to win the crowd, the applause, the spotlight, and still get it all wrong? Because the only thing that really matters is who you are when no one's watching." She let that sit between them, and then said quietly, "So who are you now?" Miles met her eyes. "Someone who wants more mornings like this. Someone who wants to stop running. Someone who wants to build a life with meaning, and maybe with someone who makes the air feel easier to breathe." Her breath caught. She stepped around the counter, stopping just a foot in front of him. "You mean it?" He nodded. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Joanna reached for his hand this time, not letting go. The rain slowed outside. The cafe glowed. And in that small, honest space between two people learning how to begin again, something steady began to grow. Not just romance, not just forgiveness, but home. The next few days unfolded like something out of someone else's life. Miles spent his mornings at the cafe, usually before the doors even opened. He'd roll up his sleeves and help Joanna prep his hands, learning how to knead dough, instead of closing billion-dollar deals. By afternoon, he'd take meetings with city officials, review potential properties with Roger, and sketch out plans for a business incubator that might just bring new life to downtown Savannah. And every evening they walked. Sometimes just down the block, sometimes farther past the river, or through quiet neighborhoods, wrapped in Spanish moss and the hum of cicadas. It was simple, peaceful, like neither of them wanted to break whatever fragile thing was growing between them by naming it too soon. But underneath the quiet, there was something stirring. It happened the evening Harper showed up unannounced. Joanna was closing up. Miles was wiping down tables, his sleeves rolled high, a smear of flour still on his collar. Harper stepped in her heels, clicking across the floor, eyes sharp as ever. "Didn't think I'd find you playing barista?" she said to Miles with a smirk. He grinned. "Didn't think I'd enjoy it." Harper turned to Joanna. "Mind if we talk?" Joanna gave a slow nod, sensing the shift in energy immediately. They stepped outside onto the back patio, leaving Miles inside to finish up. Harper crossed her arms. How serious is this? Joanna blinked. What you and him? Joanna frowned. Is that your business? Harper didn't flinch. It is when the entire town is watching it unfold like a real-time fairy tale. And when someone with his kind of past and his kind of money starts making moves in a place like this, people talk. Joanna leaned against the railing, jaw tight. So let them. I'm not judging, Harper said. I'm asking because I care. Because I know you and I know how much of yourself you give to people. And I need to know, are you protecting your heart here? Joanna looked out into the dark, the porch light casting soft gold over her features. I'm not afraid of him, Harper. That's not what I asked. There was a beat of silence. Then Joanna whispered, I've spent most of my life building something steady, something real. And he walks in and suddenly I'm thinking about more, about dreams I buried a long time ago, about possibilities I stopped letting myself want. Harper stepped closer. That's beautiful, but it's also dangerous if it isn't mutual. Joanna turned. It is. I feel it in the way he looks at me when I'm not saying anything, in the way he listens, in the way he stays. Harper studied her for a long second, then softened. Okay, she said. But just don't lose yourself trying to be part of someone else's world. I'm not, Joanna said. We're building something together. That's the difference. The door opened. Miles peeked out. You two okay? Joanna smiled. Yeah, we're good. He held up 2 mugs of decaf. Thought you could use something warm. Harper took hers with a nod. You're a hard man to read, Miles. Good, he said. I'd rather be known slowly. She raised her cup. Just take care of her. Miles didn't hesitate. I intend to. They sat for a few minutes under the soft hum of the patio light, sipping and listening to the sounds of the night. Then Harper stood. I'll leave you two to it. But Joanna... She paused at the door. Just remember fairy tales only work when both people stop running. Joanna nodded. When Harper was gone, Miles turned to her. What did she mean? Joanna gave a sad smile. She's just looking out for me. Miles reached across the table, took her hand gently. I'm not going anywhere. I believe you. But even as she said it, something in her chest twisted, an old fear, uninvited, creeping in like a shadow behind the light. Because the truth was, when something feels this good, the heart starts waiting for it to vanish. The next morning, Joanna opened the cafe like always. Same steps, same smells, the gentle hum of the espresso machine, the comforting scratch of chalk on the specials board. But nothing felt the same. She hadn't slept well. Not because of something Miles did, but because of something she couldn't name, some quiet tension blooming in her chest, like an old memory knocking on a closed door. By 9 a.m., the cafe was half full. Locals trickled in with stories about the reunion, about Miles. A woman from church asked if the rumors were true. Was he buying property? Starting a business? Joanna smiled politely, gave nothing away. At 9:15, Miles walked in. He looked rested, confident, a file tucked under his arm. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You okay? He asked softly, stepping up to the counter. She nodded. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. Miles hesitated, then placed the folder on the counter and slid it toward her. I've been working on something. She looked at it, but didn't open it. What is it? A draft proposal, he said. For the incubator. Business mentorship community redevelopment training programs. Roger's interested. The city council, too. I want you involved. Her stomach nodded. Me, yes. I want you as a co-lead, partner. This was your idea before it was mine. Joanna's hands stayed at her sides. Miles, That's a lot. I know. That's why I'm bringing it to you first. I don't want to move forward unless you want this too. She looked down at the folder again, but all she saw was 100 questions rising behind her eyes. What would this mean? For her life? For them, I just need a little time, she said. He nodded slowly. Of course, as much as you need, but she saw the flicker in his expression. He hadn't expected hesitation, and that's when it hit her they weren't walking at the same pace anymore. Later that afternoon, Miles was downtown meeting with Roger and a few city officials. Joanna stayed behind, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, checking inventory twice. Harper showed up just past 4, like she had a radar for unease. Joanna barely looked up from her receipts. Don't say it. I haven't said anything, Harper replied, pulling up a stool. But okay, now I'm going to, Joanna sighed. You're pulling away, Harper said simply. He's here. He's showing up, and you're scared it's going to fall apart. I'm not pulling away, Joanna insisted. I'm thinking, processing. Harper nodded, but her eyes were sharp. Why does love feel more dangerous than being alone? Joanna didn't answer. Harper leaned forward. Look, I get it. He came in fast. This all happened fast, but not all storms destroy. Some clear space for something new. Joanna swallowed hard. I've built a life I trust. I don't want to give that up for something that could change or disappear. Then don't give it up, Harper said. Build on it, expand it. But don't run from something just because it's unfamiliar. Joanna looked at her friend, finally letting her shoulders drop. I don't want to lose myself. You're not, Harper said. You're finding another part of yourself, the one that stopped hoping a long time ago. At 6 p.m., just before closing, Miles returned. This time his smile was cautious. I wrapped early, he said. Thought maybe we could grab dinner. Joanna hesitated. He noticed. You don't have to say yes. No, I want to, she said quickly. I think we need to talk. The words came out softer than she meant, but they were honest. He nodded gently. Okay, let's talk. They sat in the quiet corner booth, the one near the window. The sky was turning that deep southern pink as the sun dipped behind the old rooftops. I'm not saying no to your offer, Joanna began, fingers lightly touching the edge of her mug. But I'm not ready to say yes either. Miles waited, listening. I've worked so hard to build this place, this life. It's mine. It's small, but it's solid. And when you walked in, everything started shifting. I didn't expect to care this much this fast. I didn't either, he said quietly. And maybe that's the problem, she whispered. Maybe we moved too fast. Miles didn't argue. He just nodded once. I want this, he said. Us, the project. All of it, but not if you're not fully with me. She looked up at him. I want to be. I just need to catch my breath. I need to know this isn't just another high you're chasing. He leaned forward, steady and sure. Joanna, you're not a chapter in a comeback story. You're the reason I'm rewriting the whole book. Her throat tightened. Then be patient with me, she said. Let me grow into this with you. I'm not going anywhere, Miles said. I'll wait as long as you need. Outside, the last light of day faded. And inside, something just as rare took root, grace in the middle of uncertainty. Not the end. But maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something worth holding on to. The next morning, Joanna stood in her kitchen long before sunrise coffee growing cold in her hands. The quiet felt heavier today. Not lonely, just full. Full of everything unsaid between her and Miles, of the weight of possibility and the fragile balance between comfort and change. The cafe would open in an hour. But she wasn't thinking about muffins or registers. She was thinking about whether love, real, steady, life-altering love, could exist without losing the ground she'd built under her feet. Her phone buzzed. a message from Miles. No pressure, just wanted you to see this. Attached was a photo. It was the small brick building on the corner of Magnolia and 5th, the one that had been boarded up for years. In the photo, it looked different, cleaned, like it was waiting to breathe again. I made an offer for the incubator space, but I left it unsigned. Figured we should decide together. Joanna stared at the screen. Not just because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He hadn't pushed, hadn't tried to prove anything. He was showing her that they could move forward, but only if she was ready. At 9 sharp, she opened the cafe, but her mind was still on that photo. By 10, Harper walked in sunglasses, perched high energy, already buzzing. Okay, what's with the face? She asked, sliding onto a stool. You look like someone just asked you to jump out of a plane. Joanna gave a weak smile. Miles wants to buy that old brick building. For the incubator. But he won't sign without me. Harper paused. That's big. I know. Harper studied her. But you're not scared of the project, are you? Joanna didn't answer. Harper leaned closer. You're scared because he's making room for you, and you don't know how to trust that. Joanna looked down at her hands. No one's ever done that before. Then maybe it's time to let someone. The bell over the door jingled again. This time it was Roger holding a rolled-up blueprint and a hopeful smile. Morning, he said, glancing between the two women. I'm guessing you've heard from Miles. Joanna nodded. He sent a photo. Roger unrolled the blueprint gently across the counter. I thought you might want to see this. It wasn't just plans. It was vision. A space not just for new businesses, but for mentorship, collaboration, creativity. Right in the heart of Savannah. Roger tapped the corner of the blueprint. He left this space labeled Community Room. Told me it was your idea. Joanna blinked. He remembered that Saeed, you believed people grow faster when they feel seen. Joanna felt something press against her ribs, something warm, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. Roger smiled. He's not just building a business, he's building something that matters. And he wants you there. She swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Thanks, Roger. When he left, Harper waited exactly 3 seconds before speaking. Well, I need to talk to him, Joanna said. Not just about the project, about us. Later that afternoon, she found Miles exactly where she thought he'd be on the back patio of the Cafe Hands, scribbling notes across a yellow legal pad, coffee at his elbow. He looked up when he saw her. I didn't want to push, he said softly. I know, she replied, sitting across from him. For a moment, they just sat, breathing the same air, letting the weight of what they were building settle between them. I saw the blueprint, she said. The community space, the mentorship model, the way you're pulling people in. He nodded. It's not just mine. It never was. Joanna looked at him. Really looked. Why me, Miles? He didn't hesitate. Because you know how to hold people, not rescue them, not fix them, hold them, in their uncertainty, in their strength. And when I'm around you, I don't feel like I need to prove anything. She felt her throat tighten. I'm scared, she admitted. I am too, he said. But maybe that's what makes this real. She reached across the table, hand trembling just slightly, and rested it on top of his. I want to do this, all of it, but I need to go at my pace. I'll match it, he said without missing a beat. Every step. They sat there until the sun shifted, casting long shadows across the wood planks. Joanna smiled, eyes glinting with the start of something brave. Let's build it then. And with that, they didn't just promise a project. They promised a beginning. Together. A week later, the old brick building on Magnolia and 5th no longer looked forgotten. The plywood had been taken down. Fresh coats of primer covered the once flaking walls. Inside, beams of light filtered through tall windows, dancing over wide floorboards, and the smell of dust giving way to possibility. Joanna stood in the middle of it, all arms crossed, hair pulled back, clipboard in hand. She was squinting at paint swatches when Miles walked in with 2 coffees and a smile that still made her forget to breathe for a second. Hazelnut and oat milk. "Don't say I never listen," he teased. She took the cup, grateful. "I could get used to this. The building or me showing up with your coffee order memorized." She gave him a look. "Don't make me answer that." He laughed and stepped beside her, surveying the space. "Think we're crazy for doing this? Absolutely," she said. "But maybe that's the point." There was a pause, one of those good ones, where neither person felt like they had to fill the silence with anything but being there. Then Joanna said, "We're getting close to opening the applications for the program. Roger wants to make it official with the city. Public meeting next week." Miles nodded. "I'll be there." And she hesitated, then looked at him. He asked if I'd speak, about what this means, for the town, for second chances. Miles looked at her with nothing but pride. "You're the heartbeat of this whole thing, Jo. They should hear that from you." Her cheeks flushed, but she nodded. "Okay." As she turned to walk toward the mock-up of the community room, she paused at the sound of her name. "Joanna." She turned. Miles had something in his hand, a small, worn notebook, the edges soft from use. He stepped closer, suddenly looking more nervous than she'd seen him in weeks. "I wasn't sure if I was going to show you this," he said. "But you asked me once why I came back. Why now? And this is part of the answer." He handed her the notebook. She opened it slowly, flipping through pages of sketches, quotes, scribbled notes in the margins. But on the first page, the one that caught her breath, was a photo clipped from a yearbook. Her. She looked up, stunned. Miles shrugged lightly. "Back in high school, when everything was noise and mockery and silence, you were the one kind face in the crowd. You probably don't even remember. But there was this day after Chase poured soda on my project. I walked out of the science lab, ready to disappear." Joanna's eyes softened. "And you?" Miles continued, voice low. "You followed me into the hallway, handed me a towel, and said, 'They don't define you. They don't even know you.'" She blinked hard, throat tightening. "I said that you did. And I held on to those words longer than I should admit. When I made my first big deal, I thought of you. When I bought my first house, stood in empty rooms with glass walls, I wondered what it would have meant to have someone like you next to me. Not because I needed saving, but because you saw me." Joanna closed the notebook slowly, fingers trembling just a little. "I didn't think I made a difference," she whispered. "You made the difference." The air between them thickened, filled with things unsaid, and hearts finally speaking out loud. "Miles," she said, stepping close, "this town didn't just need you. I did. I just didn't know it." His eyes searched hers. "Are we still building this, I mean?" She didn't hesitate. "Brick by brick." He exhaled relief in his smile. But before the moment could rest, Harper appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. "Sorry to break the emotional climax," she said, raising her eyebrows, "but we've got a situation." Joanna blinked. "What kind of situation, Chase?" "He just posted a video. He's claiming the whole project was his concept, and that Miles stole the idea from a classmate back in college." Miles's jaw tensed. Joanna's face fell. What Harper handed over the phone, the screen already opened to a clip that was quickly gaining views. In it, Chase stood in a staged office, confidently spinning a narrative of betrayal, intellectual theft, and how he'd graciously stepped back to let Miles save face. Joanna muttered, He's weaponizing your story. Again. Miles stared at the screen, expression unreadable. Then he handed it back. I'm not fighting him, he said quietly. I'm not dragging this into some public feud. So what are you going to do? Harper asked. Miles looked at Joanna, steady. I'm going to tell the truth, in front of the entire town. Joanna took his hand. Then I'll be right there with you. Their fingers intertwined. The battle wasn't over, but they were no longer standing alone. The old town hall hadn't seen a crowd like this in years. Rows of chairs were filled, people standing along the back wall, even a few leaning by the doorframe just to hear. Local business owners, retired teachers, curious neighbors, and news reporters with microphones and restless cameras. All of them gathered not just to hear about a new project, but to watch something unfold. Joanna sat near the front, hands clasped in her lap. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with a deep awareness that this moment, this truth, mattered more than any ribbon cutting or press release ever could. Miles stood center stage in a simple gray blazer, no script in his hands, just his voice and his story. He took a long breath before he began. I used to believe success meant silence, that if you worked hard enough, earned enough, you didn't have to explain yourself, that people would just see your value in what you built. He paused, scanning the room. But sometimes, even when you build everything right, the wrong story still gets told. A ripple moved through the audience. I'm not here to defend myself, Miles continued, because the truth doesn't need defense. It just needs daylight. Joanna could feel every eye on him, every heart listening closer. I didn't steal this idea, he said clearly. This project, the business incubator, the community mentoring the local startup grants, it wasn't born out of strategy. It came from a conversation I had with someone who reminded me that real change starts when we stop trying to impress each other and start showing up for each other. He turned slightly, looking toward Joanna. Their eyes met. She gave the smallest nod, just enough to anchor him. I was the kid no one believed in, the loser they invited to a reunion to laugh at. But I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to remember who I was before the world told me I wasn't enough. And more importantly, to thank the people who saw me when I didn't see myself. The room was so still, even the air seemed to hold its breath. So let Chase tell his story, Miles said softer now. Let anyone who needs to feel important take their moment. But here's what I've learned: quiet integrity, the kind you don't post about, the kind that wakes up early and stays late and never asks for credit. That's what builds something that lasts. There was a pause. Then applause. Not polite, not hesitant. Real. Joanna felt tears gather behind her eyes, not because of the words alone, but because of the man saying them. Afterward, people came up to shake his hand, to offer support. But Miles' gaze never drifted far from her. And when the room finally began to empty, he crossed to where she stood waiting. I didn't know if I said too much, he murmured. You said exactly what needed to be said. He reached for her hand. I meant all of it. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. I know. They left together, walking slowly beneath the amber glow of the street lamps. The town was quiet, the way it always was, at the end of something big and the start of something real. They stopped in front of the cafe, the windows dark, the sign flipped to closed. But inside, a single light still burned over the counter. Miles looked at it, then back at her. I used to think life happened in boardrooms and jet lounges. But this place, it has its own kind of gravity, she whispered. He smiled. And I'm not floating anymore. She laughed gently, brushing her fingers along his cheek. So what now? We build, he said. We open the doors. We mentor the next generation. We pour coffee and offer hope. We write the story ourselves. Joanna looked up at the quiet building. It's not flashy. No, Miles said, but it's home. And for the first time in a long, long while, they both felt what that word truly meant. A place where you're not defined by who you were, but by who you choose to be now. A place where healing isn't loud, but lasting. A place where second chances aren't given, they're earned. They stood there in the warm hush of the evening, two people who had been through the fire, not just surviving it, but becoming through it. And as Miles wrapped his arm around her shoulder, pulling her close, Joanna whispered with a smile, "We may not have planned this life, Miles, but it feels like the one we were meant to build. And this time there was no fear in loving, only peace."